Clean up this mess and get that thing out of my sight. The presence of someone like you pollutes the very air in this building." The words fell like a blade. Preston Holloway III's voice was so sharp it seemed it could slice through the massive steel frame of Croft Holdings International, the global investment empire reigning over Manhattan. Its tower of glass and steel rose like a kingdom in the sky, cold and distant, reflecting the city's night lights like a crown never meant for the ordinary. The man who spoke was the embodiment of that world. Preston Holloway III, heir of a dynasty bred to sit upon the throne of finance. His Tom Ford suit bore no crease, his tie cinched tight at the throat, polished leather shoes clicking a flawless rhythm on marble floors. His eyes scanned the space as if inspecting merchandise, not people. He moved with the slick assurance that only privilege at birth could confer. Just a few steps away, Sarah Jenkins stopped. Her shoulders sank for a fraction of a second almost. Imperceptible before she forced herself upright again. The rubber-gloved hands tightened on the mop, then relaxed. She didn't reply. Just a nod habitual, resigned, but not broken. Her old shoes were polished until they shone, as though that faint gleam was the last shard of dignity she could cling to in a world that had no room for her. On the cart beside her, a worn plastic lunchbox was neatly packed away, and in one corner, brighter than anything else, lay a brand-new box of crayons, a gift she had bought for her daughter by cutting down her own meals. That thing. The phrase Preston had spat drilled straight into Sarah's chest. She knew he wasn't talking about her. Her eyes shifted toward the corner of the hall. Maya, 8 years old, sat cross-legged on the cold marble floor, absorbed in coloring. Tiny hands gripped a crayon, eyes fixed on each line. Innocent. Oblivious. Unaware she had just been called a thing. Sarah bit her lip so hard she tasted the metallic tang of blood. Her heart seized, but her face stayed composed, stoic in silence. Preston lifted his head high, satisfied with the wound he had carved, and strode on. His heels struck a cadence, echoing down the gleaming corridor, like the roll of a drum at an execution. Sarah bent down, resuming her work. Maya kept coloring, unaware that moments before, her very existence had been dismissed by a powerful man as nothing more than dust on his sleeve. Just beyond a thick steel door, a few steps away, Julian Croft sat motionless. The luxurious Eames chair cradled his frame, but he was no more alive than a statue. Warm light spilled across a face drawn gray from too many sleepless nights. His eyes stayed half shut, as if to block out the storm raging inside. Behind him, a vault door stood wide open, not by accident, but as a test. Julian had once believed, and people believed, that trust, honesty, and loyalty could still exist in an industry sharpened by steel and teeth. But he had been wrong. His closest friend, his longtime partner, had betrayed him. Millions vanished. Smiles proved false. Handshakes reeked of cold blood. And finally, whispers trailed him. Croft was old, soft, toothless. That open vault was his small revenge, his experiment with humanity. If anyone saw it, what would they do? Take a piece? Or leave it untouched, as though it had never existed? He was prepared for disappointment. And tonight, the test began. Sarah bent low, scrubbing the floor. For a fleeting moment, Maya's eyes caught the half-open door. A silver gleam spilled from within, unlike the sterile light of the hallway. Drawn to it, she rose quietly. Sarah didn't notice. All she heard was the swish of the mop, the thud of her own heart still unsteady from Preston's insult. Maya stepped forward, pushed the door, and slipped inside. The room was wide, dim, lit only by the glow spilling from the gaping vault. And inside a treasure. Crisp stacks of money lined shining steel shelves. A small bulb within made the bills shimmer like a castle from a fairy tale. Julian's eyes cracked open. The defining moment. He held his breath. Every muscle tensed, braced for the familiar sight. Small, trembling hands snatching at a bill, a bundle. He had rehearsed that scene in his mind, prepared himself for the stab of disappointment to sink even deeper. But Maya didn't. She frowned instead. A few stacks were crooked, leaning slightly out of line, with the careful earnestness of a child. Guarding her most important game, she stepped forward and gently straightened each pile. Her little hands trembled with the effort to be precise. Then she whispered, as if to herself, "Mommy says pretty things should always be neat." The voice was soft as a breath, but the hidden microphone carried every syllable into Julian's ears. He froze. The words cut straight through the fortress of ice inside him. It wasn't just honesty. It was reverence for beauty. Innocence is trying to keep the world orderly and clean amid chaos and greed. A crack-fragile yet undeniable split. The fortress of doubt inside Julian Croft. He glimpsed the smile of his late wife flicker in Maya's eyes. Memories he thought long buried surged back the one light that had ever made him believe in goodness. He was no longer still because of performance. He was still because he was paralyzed. His body seized as if someone had touched the heart. That had been frozen, coaxing it to twitch after years of slumber. Sarah looked up. Maya was gone from sight. Her heart leapt. She dropped the mop and rushed toward the open door. Inside, she found her daughter. The sight choked her. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Croft." Her voice shook, rasped by fear. She hurried to pull Maya out, clutching her tightly. Julian didn't respond. He only watched. For an instant, his eyes met Sarah's, the gaze of a woman long acquainted with humiliation, yet still carrying a small flame of pride. The door closed. Julian remained alone, but his heart was no longer cold ash. For the first time in years, a faint spark crept in, igniting something he thought long dead. Hope. The Manhattan night sky cast a pale blue glow across the towering glass panes of Croft Holdings International. The skyscraper pierced the clouds. Like a cold sword, a monument where power and arrogance reigned supreme. Inside, the gleaming corridors echoed not only with the sound of leather shoes, but also with whispers laced with venom. Preston Holloway III no longer needed to scream at Sarah. He knew well that what kills a person is not a single strike, but thousands of small cuts that make them bleed out slowly. One morning, just after Sarah had finished polishing the marble floors on the 72nd level, Preston strolled past. The Italian espresso in his hand tilted, accidentally, spilling dark liquid across the surface she had scrubbed spotless. He crouched down with a smirk. Oh, the cleaning standards have dropped lately. The next day, the HR department received an anonymous email. Signs of unsanitary conditions in service areas caused by substandard cleaning staff. No one said it outright, but everyone knew who it pointed to. He repeated such games endlessly, overturning trash bins moments after she emptied them, dropping half-burnt cigar stubs in the walkway. Each act was like a dull knife, not enough for charges, but enough to wear Sarah down piece by piece. She felt it all. This job was her whole world rent money. Maya's crayons, the simple meals that kept them alive. Losing it meant losing everything. Each time Preston's silhouette appeared at the far end of a corridor, her stomach tightened, icy cold as if gripped by an invisible hand. Yet every night she went home, wrapped her arms around her daughter, inhaled that fragile warmth as though it were the only shield she had against cruelty. What Sarah didn't know was that every move Preston made was being watched. In a dim room, above, Julian Croft sat before a wall of screens. Cameras, microphones, the productivity tools Preston himself had once proudly proposed, now served as mirrors reflecting every shard of malice he sowed. Julian didn't explode in rage. His fury wasn't fire, but ice-cold, silent, certain. He wanted Preston to weave the rope himself, then hang with it. He picked up the phone. "Leo," he said, voice heavy as a verdict. On the other end, Leo. Martinez, a former FBI investigator, replied curtly. Julian leaned back, eyes fixed on the screens. I'm unleashing the hounds. I want everything on Preston Holloway 3. His past, his present, his secrets. I want his soul on a platter. That night, the upper floor hallway lay silent. Sarah held Maya's hand as they walked toward the service elevator. Suddenly, a shadow blocked their way. Preston. The stench of expensive whiskey clung to his breath. His eyes gleamed with liquor and power. He stepped forward, pressing Sarah back against the wall. He didn't touch her, but he didn't need to. The air itself thickened under the weight of his presence. I know what women like you do to get ahead. Tell me, what's your price? Or does Croft get it for free? Sarah froze. Maya clung to her mother's back, sobbing not in that instant. Fear shattered into another flame. Sarah lifted her chin, meeting Preston's eyes. For the first time, her gaze did not drop. No trembling, remained only fury. She said nothing, only clutched her daughter tighter and walked on. Yet her eyes spoke like an oath. I will no longer be the victim. In the war room, bathed in the glow of screens, Julian saw it all. His hand clenched, rattling the table, a glass trembling at the edge. That's it, he said, voice like steel. He pressed the comms button. Leo, the hunt is over. It's time to build the trap. On the monitor, Julian's face reflected in the cold blue light, not the face of an investor anymore, but that of a king setting the hour of execution for a rotting subject. Croft Holdings International was entering the grandest season of the year, the annual charity gala. In New York's financial circles, it was more than a display of gowns and glittering champagne flutes. It was a theater of power, where every handshake and every speech carried the weight of a declaration. And this year, for Julian Croft, it would be the gallows dot in a sealed room, the glow of multiple monitors lit. Julian's and Leo Martinez's faces. Thick files spread across the table. Emails, text messages, anonymous testimonies. Leo had uncovered the people Preston had left scarred in his wake. A young black assistant was forced out for being culturally unfit. A Latin employee pushed off a project by fabricating lies. They had once remained silent, but now under Leo's protection, they found the courage to speak. Piece by piece, the fragments assembled into the true portrait of Preston Holloway III, a predator in a businessman's suit. The indictment swelled to hundreds of pages, each sheet a sharpened blade in Julian's hand. But it wasn't only Julian and Leo preparing. Sarah had changed too. After the night she was cornered against the wall, she no longer tried to make herself invisible. Every day she carried a small notebook. Dates, times, locations, every word Preston spat recorded in precise detail. Her phone at times glowed faintly as it secretly captured his throwaway remarks, laced with contempt. She was no longer just a janitor with a mop. She was forging a weapon of her own. Then Julian set the bait. In a meeting for gala preparations, he stated calmly, "The centerpiece of this year's charity auction will be my wife's platinum medallion." The room fell silent. Everyone knew it was his most sacred keepsake. The words dropped like a hunk of raw meat into a pool of sharks. And as Julian predicted, Preston lunged. In his mind, a plan flashed. If the medallion vanished and was later discovered in Sarah's cart, everything would collapse. Sarah would be ruined, Julian humiliated. A perfect move. He began plotting at once, blind to the fact that every step he took was being choreographed like a puppet's dance. Leo had already crafted an impeccable replica of the medallion. The real one was safely locked away. Julian made no move to stop Preston. On the contrary, he cracked the door open, leaving just enough of a gap for the trap to look like an opportunity. He knew a man like Preston could never resist. In the dark, Julian smiled, not with joy, but with the cold satisfaction of a hunter who smells blood. The night of the gala arrived. The grand hall blazed with light, chandeliers spilling down like an artificial sky. Ball gowns swept the marble floors, black tuxedos gleamed, and hollow laughter filled the air. Champagne shimmered. The orchestra swelled together, forming a painting of decadent splendor. Sarah worked backstage, her heart racing but her eyes steady. She knew tonight something was coming. Julian stood upon the stage, his face calm to the point of frost, each word of his speech hammering nails into the coffin waiting for Preston. And Preston, clad in a flawless black tuxedo, smiled with the smugness of a man convinced he had already won. He prowled through the crowd, glancing backstage now and then, biding his moment to strike. The atmosphere was strung tight as a bowstring. No one in that glittering room knew they were about to witness not a gala, but a public execution. The music faded as Julian Croft stepped onto the stage. Beneath the chandelier light, he looked like a living statue, calm, cold, unmoving amid a sea of glittering gowns and tuxedos. His voice echoed through the grand hall, speaking of responsibility, of integrity, of the worth of character in a world where money usually decided everything. And then, slicing across his words like a blade through music, Preston Holloway III strode out. He raised a hand, his voice booming, full of counterfeit heroism. "Ladies and gentlemen, forgive me for the interruption, but we have just suffered a theft. Mrs. Croft's platinum medallion, an irreplaceable treasure, has gone missing." The hall erupted in whispers. All eyes turned toward him. Preston paused for effect and pointed backstage. "The thief is right there. Security, check that woman's cart." Murmurs spread like waves. Sarah froze, her hand resting on a cart piled with cleaning cloths. 2 guards stepped forward, following Preston's script searching, then discovering the medallion. A moment of frozen silence. The medallion glittered under the lights like damning proof. The crowd broke into gasps and whispers, eyes filled with pity and contempt raining down on Sarah. Maya burst into tears beside her. For Sarah, it was hell made flesh. On stage, Preston stood tall, chin lifted like a judge delivering a sentence. A smug smile on his lips was the face of evil, convinced it had won. But Julian showed no surprise. He stepped forward, his voice cutting cold through the clamor. "Preston, thank you for the performance." The entire hall held its breath. "But you're mistaken. My wife's medallion has been here all along." He slipped a hand into his vest pocket and drew out the real medallion. The chandelier light caught it, flaring in unmistakable brilliance. A sharp gasp swept through the hall. Preston went pale, the color draining from his face in an instant. Julian gave a signal. The massive screen behind him, which had displayed the gala's logo, suddenly shifted. The first video, hidden camera footage of Preston sliding the fake medallion into Sarah's cart minutes earlier. The crowd cried out in shock. The second, an audio recording blasted through the speakers, Preston's voice hissing, "Clean up this mess, and then get that thing out of my sight." Whispers turned into waves of outrage. The third, another recording, his voice to a friend, "You have to put these people in their place. A little fear keeps them manageable." Then came the emails, texts, sworn testimonies, each flashing on the screen, line by line. No rumor, no speculation. The truth itself, projected for the city's most powerful eyes to see. The grand hall erupted. This was no exposure. It was a digital execution, precise as an airstrike. On stage, Preston staggered. The smile vanished, leaving only panic in his eyes. He stumbled back, searching for escape through the sea of furious stares. But at the exit, Leo Martinez and 2 undercover officers were waiting. Cold steel cuffs snapped around his wrists. Julian raised the microphone again, but he didn't speak about Preston. He spoke about Sarah. He told the story of Maya, the little girl who once walked into his office at night, saw a vault overflowing with money, and instead of taking a bill, carefully straightened the stacks, whispering, "Mommy says pretty things should always be neat." "That," Julian said, his voice carrying across the hall, "is true integrity. A woman with nothing but resilience, who yet possesses the rarest treasure of all, character." He lifted his gaze, sweeping it over the crowd. Tonight you have seen two kinds of people. A man who had everything, but was hollow inside. And a woman who seemed to have nothing, yet became the moral compass we need. Preston Holloway will be terminated immediately and face justice. As for Sarah Jenkins from tomorrow, she will serve as Croft Holdings Director of Diversity and Inclusion Initiatives. Silence hung for a beat. Then a clap, another, and then the hall rose to its feet. Thunderous applause crashing like a storm. But it wasn't for Julian. Every hand, every cheer was for Sarah. She stood there, tears streaming, trembling as she clutched Maya, rushing into her arms. The entire hall bore witness to that moment. Not a janitor anymore, but the living embodiment of justice that the gala ended. The last footsteps leaving the grand hall still murmured about Preston Holloway's downfall. But on the top floor of Croft Holdings International, there was no more music, no applause, only the silence of a beginning got in Julian's vast office. The lights of Manhattan spilled through the glass like a carpet of diamonds. Sarah sat quietly on the sofa, Maya fast asleep in her mother's arms, her breathing steady, her small face finally at peace after the storm. Julian poured 2 glasses of water, placing one before Sarah. Not champagne, not rare whiskey, just clear water, simple and sincere. "I'm sorry," he said, voice low and heavy, no longer the voice of a billionaire, but of a man, "for what you had to endure." Sarah shook her head, her eyes red, but brighter than ever. "You don't need to apologize. You gave me something I never had before, a chance to fight." Julian nodded gently. He offered no empty promises, he offered action. On the desk, he opened a file. The first page read, "The Maya Jenkins Education Fund, a new initiative Croft Holdings would dedicate millions of dollars to scholarships for children from disadvantaged backgrounds who still dared to dream." "Your new position is not a title to put on display," Julian said. "You will have your own budget, the authority to change hiring policies, and the power to make this company fairer. I'm not giving this out of pity. I'm giving it because you proved you hold the integrity we all need." Sarah looked at Maya sleeping, then into Julian's eyes. She knew her life had just turned to a new chapter. No longer an invisible janitor, but a woman with a voice, with the power to reshape a system. Maya stirred, rubbed her eyes, and mumbled sleepily, "Mommy, are we rich now?" Sarah smiled, radiant, free of the weight she had carried. She stroked her daughter's hair and whispered, "No, sweetheart, we're rich in something far better than money. We are rich in dignity. And now we will share it." Julian turned away, his eyes falling on the photograph of his late wife on the desk. For the first time in years, the emptiness in his heart no longer felt like a black hole swallowing everything. It was filled not with wealth or power, but with purpose. He stepped to the window. Sarah, carrying Maya, stood beside him. Together, the 3 of them looked out across the city skyline. To the east, the first light of dawn crept between skyscrapers, painting golden strokes on the glass, illuminating 3 faces survivors, transformed, now the architects of a new dawn. There were no more bosses and employees, no more strong and weak, only people who had chosen to stand, and in doing so, laid a foundation, not of steel and glass, but of courage, integrity, and the simple truth of a child. True power wasn't about the height of the skyscraper one owned, but the strength of the foundations one chose to build upon. And that night, in the heart of a concrete jungle, a new foundation was laid, not of steel and glass, but of courage, integrity, and a little girl's simple truth. The story of Sarah Jenkins, Maya, and Julian Croft reminds us of this. Real strength is not found in money, positions, or towering buildings. It lies in the courage to rise, in integrity shown through the smallest choices, and in a love strong enough to refuse surrender to injustice. Preston Holloway III had everything, yet lost it all because he was empty inside. Sarah, a single mother, invisible in society's eyes, became a symbol of justice, because she possessed what no wealth could ever buy: dignity and faith. Is not just a story of justice revealed in a glittering gala night. It is a reminder for us all. No matter who you are, no matter how small you feel, you can be the architect of a new dawn for yourself, for your family, and for the world around you. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to like this video. Share it with your friends, because someone out there might be waiting for a spark of hope, just like Sarah's. And don't forget to subscribe to Toch Story so you never miss these moving, inspiring tales of courage, love, and justice. Because who knows, the next story might be yours.